Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and today I brought on Mr. E of Darktide fame once again to talk about the MTX store in Darktide and the paid cosmetic DLC for Space Marine 2, and just the general state of paid expansions in gaming currently. What is up, man?
Hey, what's up? I'm glad that you had me back, or I'm having you back. I don't know how this works, but yeah, glad to be here. And I'll never miss a chance to talk about the Darktide store because it's such a weird topic that has plagued this game since the absolute beginning of time.
Now, I personally love Aquila's. I want to put that out there, but
Do you actually?
no, no, I
Okay.
don't.
I was about to say you're about to start a shitstorm already in
No.
the comments. Yeah, I mean, we both know what the Aquilas are about, right? Because like Vermintide 2 didn't have a premium currency that it required you to buy stuff with. You just bought stuff from the Steam store with dollars, like actual money.
Yeah, they
And
did. They did
yeah,
have something like that eventually in Darktide, I believe, or at least some people made some mods for that to like show the actual price tag on these Aquilas. But Aquilas have always been like a super controversial topic in Darktide since
mhm.
launch because the cosmetic DLC in Darktide is just extortionary in my opinion. Like $30 and nearly $30 for certain skins
Mm,
is kind of
some of it,
ridiculous.
yeah. So like it's definitely gotten better over time, but there are still items that it's just kind of like strange what you see the pricing where you'll check the store now and there's like a set of 3 hats and it's like 1,800 Aquilas, which equates to I think I want to say that's like $15 or something, which is quite a lot for 3 hats. I mean, you can only wear one hat at a time, and they're all recolors of each other. So you get stuff like that, but then you'll also get like 3 different hats that are 900. So there must be some like weird calculus that's going into determining the prices of these, but it's just arcane. It doesn't make any sense, and like that's the sort of stuff that gets players pissed off. Is like when there's no transparency as to why stuff is priced like it is,
Right.
why the store is like it is, which is kind of what I wanted to discuss today.
I feel like people are way more open to having these premium cosmetics, like the Creaseman and stuff like that, be more expensive. But like when it comes to, like these
Mhm.
tiny hats and stuff costing like 900, it is kind of ridiculous. As far as like the landscape of gaming has gone with like paid cosmetics and stuff, I feel like people in general have kind of been like frog and hot watered on this a lot. Where like previously, like 15 years ago, if you had paid cosmetic stores like this, people would flip out.
Insane, yeah.
Like it was pretty much an exclusively MMO thing, or like even MOBAs started doing it for a while. But as far as like your PvE game having these like $30 DLC skins, it's kind of ridiculous at times.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember at this time because like when I look at it, I definitely have boiled my own frog where like I'm so used to playing Path of Exile where cosmetics in that game like a single chest piece can be $25, like not even a full set of armor, it's just the chest plate. And that is a free to play game though. So that is a little bit different. But this game, I kind of like tricked myself into thinking that it's a free to play game, I guess because it's been so long since I made the initial purchase. It's a $40 game, so like, if you're not getting it on sale, you are spending $40 up front, and then they're expecting you to buy cosmetics on the back potentially. I yeah, I don't know if I think the thing that would probably makes most players mad is that there's just generally not that many cosmetics to select from that aren't on the premium store. And I think there was a big promise or a push for that early on in the game when they introduced, it's not called the Commodore's Vestures, it's like the other store where you can get like there's like literally 2 weapon skins, like a red one and a blue one for every
Yeah, they
gun in
look
the
pretty
game, and that's
terrible.
it.
Like,
And
it's
they look
supposed to
like
be,
shit.
yeah, they look
Yeah.
terrible. I think they did do a bit of a better job with the Havoc 40 skins and stuff like that, like the Havoc release stuff you could
hmm
do. It is way better than like the stuff in the proper store, but even like the currency, like gold cosmetics are just terrible in Darktide. And
Yeah.
Darktide in general, kind of a weird game where like you really don't see your cosmetics personally because you're first person, unlike a game like Space
Yeah.
Marine 2 that's third person. And as far as seeing your own cosmetics, you're gonna see your cosmetics more if you're terrible at the game and go down all the time, or you play like a
To see when you're kneeling on the ground.
yeah, if you're perma stuck on the floor,
If
you will see
if
your
you spend a lot of your
cosmetics.
time in loading screens to get back into the game after you've failed out, yeah,
Yeah,
you'll see a lot of
yeah, you
cosmetics.
get to
That
see
does
all the
kind of suck.
cosmetics.
Like you get a lot of value out of weapon cosmetics, so
Oh,
because you can
definitely.
see them, they're like right in your face. But yeah, it does suck that like there is no third person for this game because I play a lot with a third person mod, and honestly, it's not half bad. I feel like if the game had an option to play in third person, they would probably sell more cosmetics because like being able to see your own ugly ass character is usually pretty terrible. But yeah, I definitely agree that like you get a ton of, I don't know, let's say value is the word, but you definitely feel like you get value out of the Space Marine 2 cosmetics because you get to spend your whole time looking at your like blood angels or whatever you've decorated yourself as,
Yeah,
and it
they're
looks pretty
also
cool.
comparatively very cheap, which is very interesting. Because
Yeah.
a big issue people have brought up is like, first of all, people blast Fatshark on this all the time. I don't think the problem here really falls on Fatshark as much as their parent company Tencent, because if we look back at games like Dying Light came out initially and did not have like a paid DLC cosmetic store as far as I know, but eventually Tencent, which
Mhm.
is also the parent company there, they did add in a MTX store that looked suspiciously similar to the paid cosmetic store we see in Darktide now, with very similar pricing structures and like sales and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I do feel like this is not as much of like a Games Workshop issue as a lot of people might think it is, or a Fatshark issue. I think this is like primarily a Tencent issue, because we talked about this before we even went live, that the other Games Workshop games don't deal with this issue, where they
Wait,
don't
Space
have
Marine
like,
doesn't have
yeah,
the issue, right?
Space Marine does not have the issue. Like, as far as like Owlcat or the devs over at Focus Interactive or Saber Interactive, they don't have to deal with this whatsoever. And like their paid DLCs are like little packages, like here's $8 for a champion skin, and they have to work around, Games Workshop guidelines to actually make these skins look proper in game and like
Yeah.
be fully lore accurate. But in the case of our Darktide thing here, it is just a completely different problem.
It's a difficult one to like help players to see too, and this is why whenever I have the opportunity to like get on a soapbox and talk about this, I try to, because I have long ago come to the conclusion that I genuinely don't think that, I think I've heard like Tanner say the similar thing, is like I just generally don't think that Fatshark is to blame for like 90% of the issues that are not related to the like gameplay moment to moment. Like if it's to do with like, oh, an update took forever to come out, or the shop is just like really annoying and weird and has the cycling stuff, like that, I don't fundamentally think that that is a dev, like a game dev decision. And yeah, I too have seen those posts where people are comparing like Dying Light among other 10-cent games, and we know it can't be a GW issue because, like we just said, Space Marine 2 doesn't have this problem. It's got to be something related more to, yeah, like it would make sense. Like a mobile game distributor like Tencent would have that rotating store. And I think that's what most players' interest or most players' issue with it is. The other thing is, I think they're actually like fighting like a two-front war here, because of course everyone knows Games Workshop is notorious for like
Oh
being
yes.
very kind of clingy, like overly attached to their IP. And so I think that Games Workshop is probably in charge of like what they allow them to sell on the shop in any given rotation. Like, for instance, when those premium skins come out that are tied in with Rogue Trader and stuff, I
Yep.
bet they have like a 100% say in when that shit is coming out. And then, of course, they have to filter that through the lens of, oh, it does the 10-cent parameters for what is going to be on sale, how many things need to be on sale per week, like, can we get that to line up? It's just so many hoops to jump through, and we wonder why like Fatshark is so slow at developing things. It's
Yeah,
because
Games
they've got
Workshop's
like,
very strange in that like they're very
yeah.
selective in what they want to actually like stranglehold people on, because as far as like
Mhm.
Ogrins and Zealots go, they don't care remotely as much as like a Guardsman or an Astartes Space Marine and things like that. It seems like as far as outfits go, Kriegsman was like a push they made, the Rogue Trader stuff is a push they made as well. It does seem like it's a lot more aggressive in Darktide. I have to wonder like how much Games Workshop actually talks about this with Tencent themselves, about like, okay, where are you gonna put in the MTX store, because it's very obviously like, it's coming from corporate, which means that like
Yeah,
corporate's telling
it
them
feels
you have to
super
have an
corporate.
MTX store, and then on top of that they have to deal with the Games Workshop being like, okay, your corporation says, like your corporate overlords say like you have to put this in, but this is all you can put in within those guidelines, and then
Yeah,
that
like
on top of updates becomes a real pain in the ass.
I think the thing, like the one that I'll always point to is the RBDs, like the lack of any deluxe skins. Like there's no skins for RBDs at all, like weapon skins or otherwise, except the deluxe one that came out on release. And like that to me, absolutely 100% screams Games Workshop said, no, the lookbook for RBDs is this. It is very tight, is very concise. We need it to match the models because we're trying to sell models and other content here.
Yep.
And so no, you cannot get crazy with the design document on this one. And the fact that like, Fatshark's not like blind to what players say about it. They can see that players want to give, they're like, shut up and take our money, but they're like, not saying no. They're also not saying, yeah, we'll do it in the future. They're literally saying nothing, which just means that they've been gagged, right? That
Yep.
there's a gag order on the part of like Games Workshop or Tencent or
That
whoever.
must
I
feel
think
pretty
that's probably a
shitty
Games
too, to
Workshop
have to
thing.
like deal with
It
that.
sucks. Yeah, that definitely sucks because like guess who gets the blame, right? If you're a player who's not watching this, there's a good chance that because you're just not like plugged into like a lot of players probably are finding out right now that Tencent, of Riot Games fame as well as a bunch of mobile games, is
Yeah,
like actually like
enormous.
a enormous shareholder. I think they own like 60% stake in Fatshark, and like that really characterizes like how people will view the game. But as it currently stands, like most players will just look at it and be like, "Oh, it's the devs' fault. They're lazy, or they just don't want to produce cosmetics because they're busy with something else
And I feel like
or
part of
whatever."
that
And it's
issue is
like,
that a lot of devs have just been this greedy all on their own without any like type of
mhm.
corporate overlord on this. And I feel like gamers in general are just kind of fed up with the idea of like,
We're so jaded,
yeah, they
yeah.
are so jaded with MTX. Like just so, like the
So
word
ready for a
MTX,
developer to fuck me over.
battle passes. People are not a fan of these things anymore. They used to be like when they first came out in things like Call of Duty or like other games. But these days, it is a huge issue for people, and they're not willing to deal with it anymore. And when they see like a
Mm.
super aggressive MTX store, they're gonna go straight after the company because you've had YouTube channels and people going after these companies forever, and usually rightfully so. But greedy companies are nothing new. But unfortunately, in cases like this, Games Workshop and companies like was it Wizards of the Coast for Baldur's Gate 3 really do
Yeah.
stranglehold a lot of these games companies into like making the proper cosmetics, even affecting game balance at times. And having to
Yeah.
deal with that as a company and then like try to relay that to your players when you're
Well,
gag ordered.
it's
Some
super intentional though, because like they get to pretend like, oh, we're just like a company that holds all these properties you know and love, and we're innocent. And like only players who, like I said earlier, are like very aware of like the politics at play will be like, wait a second, like, oh, you're like actually like forcing our devs into like making these choices. It's not actually like entirely on them. Yeah, so like they're behind the scenes and they get to pull all the levers, and then they leave all the bad feedback for Fatshark. And it's like Fatshark got blown the fuck up when Darktide launched, because remember, it launched with the cosmetic store
Yep.
100% working. Everything else is buggy as fuck. But they didn't make the cosmetic store. It's not like they had their devs working to make this cosmetic shit. They had their art team making cosmetics, and then they were just probably porting, given like a I don't know, like a module to port in the cosmetic or the cosmetic store from
Which
Tencent
is
or
kind of
whatever.
interesting to me because knowing how a lot of the 40K fans react to like Games Workshop in general, most 40K fans do not have a good opinion of Games Workshop at all. They think they're like a super greedy company, so the fact that they didn't
Yeah.
like immediately push that into Games Workshop is kind of interesting to me because I've seen a lot of apologetics played on things that weren't even Games Workshop's fault in like other games. Where in
It's
this
hard to
one,
say. Yeah.
it's very much like right on top of Fatshark, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. I think it's like a twofold problem. Like Fatshark doesn't really do themselves any favors in some regards, where like, they'll like not address bugs for a really really long time that irritate the player base because they're just not on top of it. Like I just don't think that they have the production speed that a lot of players hope they will. And again, like that honestly also might somehow fall back to Games Workshop, because they also are like super involved in every single thing that they do. Like we've seen in interviews with them very recently. I thought that this was actually something that was only they only had in the initial development phases of the game, because I have spoken to a former like person, I'll just say person that worked with them in their early development up until patch 13, and he said that Games Workshop was meeting with them once a week to address like IP related issues and like whether or not like things are going to be permitted. And I was like, holy shit, like that's really involved. Like they are breathing down your neck. And it turns out that's still the case. Like they meet with them once per week, that's so much oversight. Like how much can you get done when
Yeah,
someone
that's
has to check
more
their homework
oversight than you would expect
once
from
a
like
week?
even like a multi-billion-dollar company with like an
Yeah.
IP. Like let's say Disney with Star Wars has less oversight in some things
Oh
that it
shit. I
feels
mean,
like kind of
they let
insane.
Ryan Ryan, what's his face?
Ryan
Make
Johnson,
Last
yeah, they did
Jedi.
do
Yeah,
that.
let
I
him
was
like
like, yeah, whatever,
Last
man.
Jedi. There was no oversight there. Like,
Do your
that guy
artistic
just
vision,
completely
pal.
cut everything.
I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
low-hanging
you just
fruit
do
to go
you.
after the the
Dude,
Last Jedi. But
this is why. Hey, we're making a podcast here. Okay,
yeah,
we're
we're
gonna
gonna
talk about
talk
The Last
about next. We'll
Jedi.
talk about
We're only 8 years
Grogu.
late on this.
That's true.
Oh, Grogu,
Yeah, the
yes.
new Grogu movie.
Um,
What do you call it though? I would say
guys, Star Wars podcast
yeah,
coming
the
soon.
Star Wars podcast. Games
The,
Workshop. I felt like they get too much shit on some points, but as far as their like hands-on approach to companies, it's kind of ridiculous. And I feel like as they expand, it really is like this Wizards of the Coastism,
it's
where
Wizards of the Coast. It feels exactly like
yeah,
Wizards.
it's
Yeah,
like
I'm
they
gonna
just
say.
can't understand how big their IP is getting, and like that this is
Mhm.
kind of problematic for them in like their own growth and like trying to like make it
Yeah,
constantly like stranglehold all these different games companies,
th- that's
strangleholds films and stuff like that.
that's literally exactly what I was gonna say. Is like, it's the same thing that I always rant about when I'm streaming and I'm trying to play like, music that YouTube will block out on like, DMCA or copyright claims. And it's like, dude, I have bought so much music and I have found so much more music through things like Machinima and random ass YouTubers putting it in their videos in like the early 2000s. And like that is how your property gets famous. Like honestly, one of the first pieces of 40K media I ever saw was Astartes, which is
Same.
not sanctioned at all. And I was like, holy shit, this is cool as fuck. And like the fact that they shut shit like that down is literally just stymieing their own growth because they're too afraid of things growing and becoming like cancerous, where like they allow like properties that bastardize the core material to like exist. But like I guess the fear is like you end up in one of those situations like a lot of comic books did after like the 80s or 70s, where like literally everybody was printing like Superman
Oh
or
yeah, it
superhero
was really
comic
bad.
books, and like you're like, okay, is it canonical that Superman like had a dinner with President Nixon? I don't know. Like we have to go to the
Not
lore books, but I don't think they have to be like so hard on it. And also the other thing that really irritates me is like being a person who's played multiple like 40K games, like I played Space Marine and I played Darktide, it just kind of really does seem like there is like some sort of favoritism at play where like Games Workshop, I would love to know, I doubt Saber will ever talk about it, but I would love to know how often Saber is actually in talks with Games Workshop, because I feel like it is probably far less than once per week, and it's a way bigger game, and it has a more like precious property to Games Workshop, I would
yeah,
imagine.
Space
Like,
Marines.
Astartes are just such a bigger deal than like random ass guardsmen and whatever
I mean, Space
whatever
Marine
else we have
2 is
here.
responsible for like really blowing up 40K in the past year. I mean, Henry Cavill and like his upcoming show did
Mhm.
that a lot too. But like it feels like, the catalyst is coming, like the major 40K explosion. And if Games Workshop keeps handling their properties like this, they keep like strangleholding every company that wants to use their IP, because way back in the day, there were a ton of terrible 40K games, and like not just lore breaking,
That's
but
true.
like they were horrific in gameplay, and it feels like they just
Well,
didn't really care that much back then compared to now.
yeah, that was actually in the same era where Vermintide 1 came from, because that was when the license, like anybody could just like,
Yep.
forget, I read at some point like how you got the license, but it was like super basically open. You could literally just like apply and get the license to produce like a 40K, or not 40K, but like a Warhammer game. And that's how Vermintide or Fatshark got the license to produce Vermintide. And thank God they did, because they like really realized the universe. But it just feels like, I mean, shit, you got to realize it. Like, this is a professional company. They're not going to do you dirty. Like, they're not going to do some crazy thing and like ruin your franchise somehow. People, like, imagine like how much would it destroy 40K to have an alternate color outfit for the Arbites? Like that's the
Yeah.
sort of thing that they're preventing with these actions. And it doesn't come off as like, oh, good on them for like, making certain that the continuity is preserved. It comes off as like, wow, really, seriously, guys, like, dick move. Like,
Yeah, I
why are
feel
you being
like
why are you being like this?
You see this a lot of tabletop game companies, especially like we mentioned before. Wizards of the Coast will do the same thing with
Mhm.
D&D and stuff like that. And like I understand they want to have like a certain consistency across all their media, which is fine, because we've had problems like that. I don't know if you ever read like Star Wars Legends way back in the day, where like the lore got so convoluted that like people were just like completely confused as to where the hell anything was anymore in like relation to each other. There were books that were written before like major property movies came out like the Attack of the Clones, that talked about entirely different situations in the lore of those series. So I doubt Games Workshop wants it to happen to 40k, but still, if you just constantly put down every company that wants to use your IP and just like to this degree, like weekly talks is kind of insane. Like at some point, you're gonna have discrepancies between your games anyways. No property is gonna be 100% consistent in lore and aesthetic. And I think that's fine because, have you ever seen, I don't know, a comic book character or something that has like this super like off the cuff version of it, like like a, I don't know, a Bizarro Superman or something like that. And I feel like that's good for a property. Like people like to see those random versions of their favorite characters and stuff like that, as long as there's an easy to follow mainline thing, which I feel like in this case there definitely is.
I so this is like I'm just like thinking that if they continue down a path, or like if any property continues down a path where they like lock off all access for like people making iterations on it, making parody of it, or whatever, the natural thing that people are going to do is they're going to find workarounds and they're going to create their own thing. And I think like Space King is like a great example
Yeah,
of this,
Space
where
King.
like people want a 40k comedy. People like there's something that's funny about like the like 40k is like kind of tragically funny in a way where like these people are just like psychopaths. Like
Yeah.
Space Marines are psychopaths. Everybody in the universe is so fucked up, and it takes like this comical look at it, and it's like, of course, so they're just gonna do that. Like those animators have done 40k. Like they'll put 40k like Space Marines in their animators before. Flash Gets has a number of ones, but like I'm certain that they were probably issued like cease and desist at some point. And so now guess what? You get one less property in the world that's going to promote your material because you're being idiots about it. And yeah, that's sort of how I feel about the situation with Darktide and Fatshark in general, where it's like if you just let Fatshark run free, I feel like honestly it would be in a better state and it would have more interesting things in it. I've heard, I think Tanner told me, I don't remember actually honestly who told me this, but like that Havoc as a game mode was an idea they've had since like the very beginning inception of the game. But Games Workshop told them that it would be too difficult for rejects to tackle. Like it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a appropriate level of operation for rejects. So they like shot them down and eventually they got it. And like,
Which is
if they
crazy
had
because if you look at
yeah,
like Space Marine 2, there's no
it's
way
like,
that Space Marine, even Primaris Marines, are cutting through like 3 Carnifexes at once. That
no,
just
but
doesn't
like
happen.
yes, it's like they've come up against like just some like rules lawyering like dick who's like, yeah, no, you can't do that actually. And it just sucks. I know a lot of people that every time the topic of what's Fatshark's next game, because there's always like rumors about like an Unreal 5 game coming from them. They're like, what's Fatshark's next game? Is it going to be like in 40k, or is it even going to be like a Games Workshop property at all? And a lot of players are like, dude, I wish Fatshark could make a game that wasn't tied to this, because like, yeah, they would have like so much free reign. I feel like they have good creative ideas, but a lot of times they're locked behind like what
The
is
license.
feasible
Yeah.
within the license. But also like I think also like this is where Games Workshop realizes they have them by the balls. It's like the license is sort of what has given Fatshark the fame, right? They have to pay it respect, because I don't like, although these are good games, I think they're fun, engaging games to play. Same thing with Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 wasn't Space Marine 2, but it was big guy in armor 2.
Yeah, if it was big guy
Nobody
in
would be playing
armor
that
too,
shit.
I mean, you might have like a tenth of the player base.
Yeah,
It's
literally like 10% maybe.
it's probably
Like, it would
like
just
a
be
little
dead.
bit over World War Z. I feel like,
Yeah,
yeah,
pretty
40k
much.
has always carried games for a long time, and 40k is a great property for games because I honestly, it's a tabletop game that translates quite well into like RPGs and stuff like that, and first-person shooters and horde shooters especially. But as far as creative freedom for the company, you do want to pay respect to the license. But in the case of a studio like Larian Studios, where they tried to pay respects to D&D and basically just got completely screwed over by
I
Wizards
know.
of the Coast. Now they're gonna go on to make like their super big and next game, and it won't have anything to do with D&D, and it's all
Oops,
because you
there
have
goes
like
that.
one
Like, yeah,
greedy
sucks
company.
to suck,
Yeah,
Wizards.
pretty much.
And it's like people like that game not because of the association with D&D, but because of all the work that Larian put into it. Like, I think that D&D is like probably even like a worse property to do that with, where because it's just like fantasy, like spell casting and shit.
Yeah.
Like you could literally just change the titles of the spells and it'd be all the same shit. 40k is at least has like recognizable figures. Like, it's pretty
Oh,
hard to like
don't
ape.
sell the D&D fans. They'll come after you with their mind flayers and all that.
Yeah,
They
sorry. Yeah,
like some
mind players
people.
are so unique.
Yeah,
Dude. They're not
some
definitely not just
people take that
Cthulhu.
D&D lore
As
seriously.
a
Okay.
fellow D&D player, of like 15 years, everything there is just ripped from other fantasy. They just somehow got a trademark on it, so it sucks
Yeah,
to suck.
40K has some pretty unique stuff. Even though it was inspired by a lot of stuff for sure. Like there isn't a ton like it in at least sci-fi fantasy, I guess these days. Star Wars has kind of fallen off super hard. Other sci-fi franchises are good, but they don't get enough releases. But as far
We're
as like,
really dogging on Star Wars today, huh?
yeah, dude, it's low hanging fruit. It's easy. It really is a generational
Just like and
fall off
subscribe if
of
you want us to dunk on Star Wars.
yeah,
more,
guys, like and subscribe. I mean, I put a community post out a while back. Man, that new Grogu movie looks like shit, and people are like, "Y'all like Star Wars?" Like, yeah, it's unfortunate, but low hanging fruit. But a fall off is a fall off. And fortunately, Star Wars had one, and I feel like 40K and other sci-fi franchises like Dune have been moving in to fill that space. And as they get bigger, as they keep pushing forward into like the mainstream, you're gonna have a bigger issue where like more and more companies will be like, "Can we use your license?" And you're gonna run the same issue where like
it's
EA,
growing pains.
Yeah, it's growing pains, pretty much, big time.
Yeah,
And
but you can't fight it like tooth and nail. Like you can't. I just feel like it's so self-destructive to be this way about it. I mean, certainly they have bean counters who are making these decisions, but like, I'll tell you, just in like, the same thing. To go back to the store, right? Like, I know, just in my heart of hearts, without being a economy major, that if they just open up the store so that every player could buy everything, then the store would make more money in Darktide, because there's so many players that I know at this point. I just don't think they're aware of like what the player base that's left is like, where there's like 10K players who probably play like rotating per week, at least in the US, and a good portion of those players, if they had access to the store, they would go in and spend $40 today.
Yep.
And they just literally can't, because they're waiting for months at a time to get these items.
I mean, look at the DLC in Space Marine 2, where people just like buy it immediately. Like one of the biggest thing people are waiting for is just like, oh, I want the new Dante skin, I want the new chapter skin and cosmetic DLC, and that's like a huge thing for people, especially in 40K, where we've talked about this before. Like the aesthetics of 40K are fundamental to the 40K experience for a lot of people. Obviously, Darktide is more gameplay focused than just cosmetics. A lot of players that play Darktide don't give a fuck about 40K. But that being said, it's still important for like a huge portion of the player base, and you'll get more players if they have that aesthetic properly represented. And I just feel like they've been kind of shooting themselves in the foot, or at least Tencent has, on top of
I think they've been being shot in the foot by other people, and then they're getting the gun planted on them, which just sucks. Because the criticism that like rings home is like, oh yeah, Fatshark's lazy. Like Fatshark has this store, they're abusing their players. It's like, I mean, sure, could Fatshark work faster? Absolutely. Could they produce more with updates? Probably. But like, they're doing better on that front. And honestly, like,
it looks worse when you have a rotating store.
I made a video recently to point out like, hey, the rotating store actually has changed. Like they've added pretty much like double the stuff to it. And again, it's another one of those situations like with the Arbites armor, where they literally never mentioned it even one time. They've never been like, guys, the rotating store is here to stay whether you like it or not, or like, we're sorry about the store, we're gonna change it. They've literally never even commented on it, which again means gag order, like in the common vernacular, the common parlance. It's just they're not allowed to talk about it. They have corporate overlords, as we all will someday, guys.
True. Some of us have it right now.
Now
I'm kind of curious
that they're corporate overlords.
That is true. I think we kind of hit the major points on the MTX from Darktide and Space Marine 2. Do you have any closing thoughts on that at all?
No, I mean, I think I've said my piece on the issue. It's just like, I will always side with my devs, especially if those devs are, as we know them to be, beholden to corporate powers above. Yes. You always got to blame the higher ups, right? Wherever the buck stops.
That's true. Never blame Fatshark and Saber Interactive, guys. That's the takeaway of this video.
Oh, you can blame Saber.
No, you can't blame. Never blame them all. It's all Games Workshop's fault. Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Fatshark sponsored your portion of this video. But anyways, guys, in all seriousness, let us know what you guys think in the comments below about the MTX store in Darktide. Do you think this is a Tencent problem? Do you think it is primarily a Games Workshop problem? How do you feel about cosmetic DLC in other games versus 40K properties? And also check out Mystery's channel. He makes a ton of Darktide content, build guides for that game, and subscribe to this channel if you like content like this.
I was about to say, if you're watching it on my channel,
That's
you got to
true.
go over there and subscribe to our subsidiary, First Door Guardsman,
It's a
and
subsidiary.
let us
Speaking of
know
corporate,
how many more. Yeah, super chat and get us to make like 50 more of these guys. Okay.
it's true.
All
All right,
right. Thanks
guys,
for watching, everyone.
and thanks for
Bye.
coming on, man.